Cliff has been very heavily involved up in Ormond Beach with a multitude of jobs. But what I want to tell you about Cliff Jackson is one of the kindest, gentlest souls I've ever known. And when several years ago there was a rift up in Ormond Beach, the congregation had split, minister had resigned, and there were opposing factions. And Cliff stepped in as president. And I asked him, what did you do? He said, I just love them into togetherness. So please help me welcome Cliff Jackson.
Good morning. I love my Prius. It just took me up to Atlanta and then up to Radford, Virginia, back to Atlanta. And then yesterday it brought me back home. It waited until this morning to tell me too much. I got the red triangle of death. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the red triangle. You pay attention to that one. Other things I don't worry about, but the red triangle of death is, I pulled over to the side of the road and waited. Looked like, I think it was the cooling for the big battery was not working right. And so I had the hood up and waited and waited and waited. I kept every once in a while just checking to see if my red friend was there, which it was. Finally, I went around and I had pressed a wrench and I disconnected the small battery and reconnected it. And I don't know whether that did it or just the additional time, but it got me going again. And so I am here and I'm going to go slowly home, not on the highway. As I said, I went up to Radford. I went to Susie. Have any of you been to Susie? All right, yes. Absolutely. So it is absolutely delightful. I think that trust is the thread that binds together society. And I cannot think of a better description of trust being the pervasive element binding together 500 or 600 total strangers for a week of fun and learning and sharing and growing from all ages. There were little tiny infants, and there were outfits, old geezers like me, and everything in between. And I led a couple workshops. I just did one this year, but I've done 3 different ones. And I've been to other workshops, and I've been to the tubing down the New River. Most of it was just gentle water conditioned, cool fun. And then it had a nice, exciting, exhilarating little whitewater at the end that I did the whole thing twice. Again, for this old geezer, it was something I was not likely to do very often, but they had checked it out and they had rope slingers in case we get carried away by the current. So the trust was just inherent in every aspect of the things that we do. There's golf carts, they call them star cars, that tell us that are walking challenged or take us wherever we need to go. So there's so many ways. Newcomers have a fluorescent green newcomer underneath their name tag badge. And it's not to ostracize, but to draw anyone and everyone, to welcome them and encouraging them in how they can get more out of that week of Susie. So I loved it, especially this year, because I had my whole family, UUs and non-UUs alike, attended, and they all loved it. So I invite you to consider checking out Susie for next year in the close to the last week of July. This morning I'll splash around ankle deep in trust for a little while. Let you get acclimated to this notion of trust and then be ready for a deep dive into trust. In March, I went on a Caribbean cruise. One of the excursions was in Jamaica, Dunn's River Falls. Anyone been to Dunn's River Falls? It had an ominous beginning. There was a little trickle as we were waiting for the bus, and then it quickly turned into a steady downpour for an hour. Finally, we loaded into the bus, and the rain said, "Gotcha," and stopped. But we drove about 15 minutes to the falls. There were about 6 other buses either ahead or behind us. We got out and started walking downhill, downhill, downhill. I couldn't see the bottom where we're going to, and I couldn't see the top of the falls either. They were both way, way up. When I got down to the bottom, it was a beautiful view, tranquil ocean, green, blue, whatever, and the little creek river washing into it. It was picturesque, delightful. But I was exhausted just going downhill. And when I looked up, I had seen a picture. It was just kind of little trickles cascading down. And with the rain, it was like thigh deep gushing over the 4 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot terraces. I was the last person in our group, and our group guide circled us up, about 20 of us, and had us all holding hands and cheering, "We can do this together." And 2 or 3 times, we kind of got into it a little bit. They're all strangers, and luckily by that time, there was another couple, Jill and Dave, behind me, so I wasn't the end of the group. And we started going up the hill, and we saw others where some were holding hands and some weren't. But maybe it was his coaching, but our group was really good at holding hands. Strangers, but still. It seemed actually even more awkward at first to be holding these people's hands and trying to have one foot solid on the ground, lift up the other foot in the water, and find a place to put that foot down and had a good purchase. But pretty soon I grew to rely on the hand ahead and the hand behind, which steadied me in that moment of uncertainty. There was a change, quite quickly actually, where I was really leading. There was a nice, strong young fellow ahead of me, and so I was holding on to that guy like he was a tree trunk. And Jill was doing likewise with my trailing arm. She was really learning to rely on it. That trust that we had was a constant flow all the way down and actually all the way back. It grew stronger and stronger. So many times I've read the words that giving and receiving happen at the same time. This was another one of those times when the words came alive. I can actually feel and live that experience. It was growing, and here I had 1,000 opportunities, 1,000 repetitions of two people being there for me, and 1,000 repetitions of me being there for them. It felt good to get to the top. It felt magical to experience that flow. I invite you to take a moment to remember a time when you were there for someone in their moment of uncertainty. Or remember when someone was there for you in your moment of uncertainty. That flow stays with us. Can you feel it? How do your ankles feel? It's time to jump into that deep dive into trust. Time to move on to live and love through the practice of trust. I felt the trust in that moment. It came from me to my partner ahead and to my partner behind. Just like love, joy, safety, happiness, and peace, trust flows through us. Trust is loving what is. Loving what is not passive. It's an honest appraisal of what is in this current moment, followed by, what am I going to do about it? It's hard to convey the concept of trust is the acceptance that everything that happens to me in my life is perfect for me to achieve the optimal expression of who I truly am. Tim mentioned a time when I had a really challenging event when the entire board resigned, the minister resigned, and the new board withdrew their names from being candidates. But it really was just the right thing for me to learn to grow. Is when I put my name in the hat to run for president, I had been thinking I was just going to love them through this, which we hadn't done in the times that had happened similarly in the past. I know I've practiced this idea many times individually that, I would often label something as bad that's happening, and I would challenge myself to love it. And then another event would come along, and another. And each time it was like it was its own separate learning. After 1,000 times and 20 years of practice, I've learned to generalize that I do not see anything happening as either good or bad. It's just an experience for me to learn how I want to express myself, how I want to relate to that learning event. The thing that's really interesting about it, Byron Katie, who's one of my favorite teachers of this idea, she says that everyone has exactly the experiences they need for their own freedom. Everybody doesn't have to have their minister or their board quit on them to have my lesson of loving through an event. you might have a very different challenge that's entirely designed for you. When I gave this back at Ormond, this talk, they had just recently read the Gandhi reading in our hymnal that it is possible to live in peace. Those words ring just as true with trust as they did with peace. If someone with courage and vision can rise to lead in trust, the winter of despair can, in the twinkling of an eye, be turned into the summer of hope. It is possible to live in trust. Trust is not a garment to put on and off at will. Its seat is in the heart, and it must be an inseparable part of our being. It is possible to live in trust. Trust, which is a quality of the heart, cannot come by an appeal to the brain. It is a plant of slow growth, growing imperceptibly but surely. It is possible to live in trust. If a single person achieves the highest kind of trust, it will be sufficient to neutralize the distrust of millions. It is possible to live in trust. The future depends on what we do in the present. It is possible to live in trust. We know this is possible because Gandhi lived it. He practiced living in peace. Gandhi held up the baton, and millions held it with him, and they changed the world. How do we nurture that kind of trust? We practice living in trust. We start by once again making that switch from everything happening to us to everything happening for us. That switch makes the impossible possible. To change everything and everyone out there is an impossible task. To change myself, that is possible. You could say it's the opportunity of a lifetime. We only have one life, and this is it. What if this moment, this situation, is exactly what this country needs? It's exactly what each and every one of us needs. When asked, what do we have? A republic or a monarchy? Benjamin Franklin replied, a republic, if you can keep it. When I read the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, my mind becomes clear and my heart knows what path I trust. What an inspirational and aspirational set of documents. Can we move forward with the kind of trust, the kind of peace that Gandhi lived? Truly powerful by being nonviolent in word and deed. We may not all be Gandhi, but perhaps enough of us will take turns carrying his baton to lead us forward as a republic. On this journey, there will be times when we are inclined to pass off or put down Gandhi's baton, to take a moment to say unkind words or do hurtful deeds, or even think such thoughts. I'm getting better at noticing them arise in me. I call that moment my edge of learning. There's always some little hidden trigger, and just by noticing the trigger, becoming aware of it, it begins to crumble. Pretty soon, that old reaction is dissolved. Road rage used to really get me. I was driving a pickup too. And if I was driving the Prius, I would wish that I was in my pickup. But I have trained myself to notice when that was arising. It's been years that I don't care whether I'm in the pickup or the Prius, and I don't really let that bother me anymore. Amazingly, a different trigger reveals itself just when I thought I had done something. Who knew I had so much work to do? Learning to live from that place of nonviolence is the source of true power. This work, this practice will be the most important work for our family, friends, country, and the world for generations. Our 7 principles are reflections of that peace, of that trust, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. I see all 7 of our UU principles being challenged in an unprecedented way. I see the greatest moment of uncertainty for our country. As Benjamin Franklin said, we have a republic if we can keep it. My question this morning is, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? Today, I carry Gandhi's baton. Do you? Namaste.